Great.
This is Hot Science with the week's top stories in science, technology, and medicine. I'm Richard Clarke, your host for today. And if I can review quickly the stories that we're going to talk about this week, for the top news, I have actually a piece of fiction. I have it because they talk about some of the ideas that are current now. And the title of the story is Excerpts from the User Guide for the Syntec 3411 bioprinter, the bits you actually bothered to reach. And in technology, I have two stories. The first story is one about ChatGPT. There are stories everywhere about this generative AI writing system. And this one says abstracts written by ChatGPT fool scientists. And in EVs, I have a story not of an EV, but an electric motorcycle. I don't know what they're going to call those, EMs, I don't know. And the Da Vinci DC-100 is a Chinese electric superbike, and it now is being introduced in the USA. And in environmental, there is a new industrial age, the coming renewable energy boom. And in space and flight, the Pentagon releases its long-awaited 2022 UFO report. I think this is the first of these UFO reports to be released. And in biology, why the zebra got its stripes. It's to deter flies from landing on it, which is what I didn't expect. And in the human story is about China, and it's about how China's population decline could affect the global economy. And finally, a medical story about how a new artificial pancreas for type 2 diabetes manages blood sugar twice as well as jabs. And this is now approved in the UK. So this is perhaps a step up for difficult cases of diabetes. Anyway, to start from the top, I wanted to talk about the user guide for the Syntec 3411 3D bioprinter. First, let me start with some images, art that was with the article, and it kind of gives you an idea of what you could make with your bioprinter. In the foreground, there are some nice bunny rabbits with rainbow-colored stripes in front of them. And in the back, there is some scary-looking winged monster who looks like he would be trouble to have in your living room. And I'll just read some from the article. It starts, "Congratulations on the purpose of your new Syntec 3411 3D bioprinter. Now, the bioprinter will not start without keying in your 4-digit PIN, which will only be revealed once you sign the online warranty agreement and personal risk. Things are tricky, which is why we're recommending users start with something less exotic. Please see the Quick Start Guide for suggestions. Although the 3D bioprinter can print anything you can possibly imagine, it cannot defy the laws of physics. The wings on even a small cat need to be surprisingly large. And funny how often new users switch from flying kittens to much larger beasts. The size of your printed creation is, by necessity, something of a compromise. It is possible to bioprint a dinosaur egg. They're really not that large, but then you'll have to hatch that egg and raise and feed an instant reptile. Feeding a ravenous, rapidly growing beast will tax even the most patient. The real problem with 3D printing a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex is by the end of the growth cycle, you have a full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex. You didn't think this through, did you? So how would you like to print an adorable bunny rabbit with rainbow-colored fur, guaranteed harmless? That is, as long as you turn to page 5 of the Quick Start Guide and follow each and every single one of the detailed instructions. So I just thought this was, on one hand, an amusing sci-fi story, and on the other hand, we haven't heard about 3D printing living organisms yet, but all of this stuff is going through such amazing development that the idea of it, I think, is not as far-fetched as it used to be. Would you like a 3D bioprinter? Would you print a bunny or a Tyrannosaurus?
Not me. I got my hands full with 2 living dogs as it is.
But it is science fiction.
It is science fiction so far. And when I started to read science fiction in about 1952, the internet and personal computers and something like the cell phones were all science fiction too.
Well, we'll have to see what Stephen King does with it.
Well, certainly, printing a nice pet is a good idea, but
I used to think the Dick Tracy watch was science fiction, and it was, but now I have one.
that's right. That's right.
I can answer my phone.
That's right. So be careful of today's science fiction. Some of it is amazingly predictive.
Tomorrow's nightmare.
Yes, yes. Certainly, that's one range of things that I continue to read is nightmare scenarios, and the developments have not made people less afraid of the nightmares, I think. Anyway, and speaking of nightmares, let me go in to the next story. And it turns out this is about ChatGPT, and researchers cannot always differentiate between AI-generated and original abstracts written by human beings. And these things like ChatGPT can write such convincing fake research paper abstracts that scientists often cannot figure out that they were written by AI instead of humans. And researchers are divided over the implications of this. Here is a woman, Sandra Washer, who studies technology at Oxford. She says, I am very worried. We're now in a situation where the experts are not able to determine what's true or not. And if we lose the middleman that we desperately need to guide us through these complicated topics, it's going to be a problem. And, you know, the chat box, ChatGPT, creates realistic and intelligent sounding text. And since its release, researchers have been trying to figure out the ethical issues because so much of its output can be difficult to distinguish from human written text. And there's a group then at Northwestern that used ChatGPT to generate research paper abstracts to test whether scientists can spot them. And so they asked the chat box to write 50 medical research abstracts. And then they compared these with original abstracts from humans by running them through a plagiarism detector, an AI output detector, and then they also asked a group of medical researchers to spot the fakes. And it turns out the GPT chat abstracts sail through the plagiarism checker. No plagiarism was detected. The AI output detector, though, saw that they were able to spot 2/3 of the generated abstracts, and the humans didn't do much better. The AI spotted 66%, and the humans spotted 68%. The humans also identified only 86% of the genuine abstracts as genuine. So they incorrectly identified 32% of the generated abstracts as being real and identified 14% of the genuine abstracts as being AI generated. So, it's not clear, and it's not clear even to the medical researchers which is AI and which is human. And if scientists cannot determine whether research is true, there can be dire consequences.
Yeah.
Scientific research plays a big part in our society now. And one commentator, a computer scientist, says, though, it's unlikely that any serious scientist will use ChatGPT to generate abstracts. The question is whether the tool can generate an abstract that is accurate and compelling. It can't. So the upside of using ChatGPT is minuscule, but the downside is significant. So he's saying it's not a big deal. Real scientists won't use it. He doesn't say, but it implies fake scientists might use it, though, as a way of dealing with disinformation at yet another level. And the author suggests that evaluating scientific communication people who are doing this need to put policies in place now to stamp out the use of AI generated text. In fact, earlier this month, the 40th International Conference on Machine Learning, which is one of the largest AI conferences in the world, announced that it has banned papers written by ChatGPT or any other AI language models. So one of the big technical organizations studying AI says you can't use AI generated papers at our conference. And so there are fields where fake information endangers people's safety, like medical research. And these fields have to have a rigorous approach for verifying information if it is to be trusted. And the final comment from the computer scientists says the solution to these issues shouldn't focus on the chat box itself, but rather, quote, the perverse incentives that lead to this behavior, such as universities conducting hiring and promotion reviews by counting papers with no regard to their quality or impact. So he's saying the solution to this AI authorship isn't with the AIs, but it's with what is a bigger problem, us people.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on this from you guys?
When it looks official enough, a lot of people will think, well, whoever wrote that is smarter than me. And so they accept it, or without giving it any real thought or thinking it through.
I just read this morning that Microsoft thinks it's pretty important. The technology, that is,
Right.
they're laying off 10,000 employees, but they're investing. There wasn't an exact number, but it said multi-billions of dollars in chat GPT.
They have announced 3 levels of investment. The first was $1 billion to get started. Then the next was $10 billion for a 49% stake in ChatGPT. And in the last few days, they've announced a 3rd round of investment. They haven't said how much it is or what it's for. But you're right, Microsoft is betting on it. And I understand Microsoft's bet is not just because they think ChatGPT will help them beat out Google in the search engine business. They are betting on it because OpenAI is madly working on artificial general intelligence. These are the AI systems that will end up being smarter than us.
Hi, I'm Jim Luce, a friend of Norman's from Spain. Fascinating discussion. A question for you all. To the extent that AI is based on algorithms created by humans, to what extent is there a difference between AI-generated research that has flaws versus human-generated research that has flaws?
Well, I don't. The first question to me is, what is the actual factual basis that the AI was fed with? AI is not any better than the information on which it is trained. And
Just like humans.
Just like humans are the
But-
same.
But Jim speaks of algorithms. Is machine learning, is deep learning
It's
algorithm.
not right. It's not algorithmic. this machine learning is much closer to pattern recognition than it is to algorithmic.
Which means it's more human.
Anyway, we all have our own ways of learning. The AI learns based on the kind of information it is fed. What humans are better at is operating in situations in which they don't know and then figuring out their path where they don't have prior information. The AI so far, when it runs into these kind of situations, just no longer has the capability to function. Even the
And it
chat
starts
GPT.
lying, right?
Hmm?
It starts to lie or make things up.
Then so this is part of what they're interested in this artificial general intelligence. Is the idea at that point is you'll have AIs that are able to grope around in the dark and then start to figure out what's going on. That's the way we humans do it. And
Good,
so
thank you.
for
Answered my
dealing with
question.
unknown situations, that's a lot better. So I would imagine as a writing research where you're trying to describe stuff that's on the edge of what people know, a human might do better than an AI, because an AI can only use information that it knows already. That's kind of like driving using your rear view mirror to guess where the road is ahead of you. And most of the time it'll work fine. Except now, the other thing I have to say personally is I've been busy learning to use Chat GPT, and I'm using it already as a writing assistant. So there's something that I'll write, and like a lot of stuff has some kind of introductory paragraph that summarizes what I'm going to say. And I found Chat GPT is very good at this, and I'm learning ways to be able to write the prompts into it so that I can focus its attention on the right subject with the right background information to give me the kind of answers for the situation I'm looking for answers in. So that's something I'm madly working on now. I don't think it's going to replace my writing because I know stuff that it doesn't know, but it can help me out. And certainly it can do things if you want, like suggesting synonyms, checking your punctuation, checking your English and stuff like that, that can just help improve the general quality. So
AI doesn't
Light
think
off.
outside the box.
Turn the light on.
Over there, yeah.
Okay.
anyway, it's a good tool. In fact, what I've found in dealing with it personally over the last week, most of the time I've been able to get in and get good response. There was something I wanted to try out this morning that I asked to log in, and it said, "We're busy, and give me your email address and we'll send you an email when you can log in." They need to use some of that
They haven't
Microsoft
been
money.
able to scale up the processors as fast as users are coming online.
Uh-huh. I'm sure. It's
The
a
other thing
problem.
that'll happen is that they'll make it available for free for a few years, and then once everybody's comfortable using it, then they'll start charging money for it or restricting the
Right.
access.
And already one of the places.
Andrew, you're absolutely right. Otherwise, Microsoft wouldn't be investing billions of dollars in it.
Well,
Yeah.
you don't think they'd be doing that unless they got some return. Now, already what I've found with some of the image generation programs, including DALL-E, which is the image generation program put out by OpenAI, is that they start and they give you some free images to start with, but then after a while, after a number of images, you have to start prepaying to generate images. Right now, it's not much. But it's like 4 cents an image or something like that. So it's pretty cheap, but it's a sign of the writing on the wall. I also have tried out a couple of other image generators, and one of them is free, and the other one is doing the same thing as Dolly is. So, that's the first sign of these guys wanting to get some return on their investment. So it's a different day. And, since if you realize Dolly, or excuse me, ChatGPT was released at the end of November. It now is about the middle of January, and there has been so much written about it. It's amazing. Now, there was an earlier generation of ChatGPT, but, it's gotten a lot of attention. And already I understand it has put some writers out of work doing routine copy. Okay, so now another technology story, and this is a story about China's
The light.
electric superbike. And the manufacturer is a Chinese bike manufacturer called Da Vinci, who I'd never heard of. And Da Vinci is a company that's a few years old, and recently it's gone global, introducing its DC 100 model to America at the CES show in Las Vegas. This is the Consumer Electronics Show. It's one of the biggest electronics trade shows in the world. It might be the biggest. And the cost for a booth there is real high. And one of the parts of the EV revolution is now CES is a big showground for introducing new EVs. So it's gone from your iPhone to the new EVs in terms of the people who are exhibiting there. Let me show you this bike. Okay, so here we have the bike. It doesn't look at all like your usual motorbike, because instead of the motor, you have this big box, and the main thing in that big box is its battery. And instead of the normal controls, you put your phone into a cradle, and your phone actually has an app that you use to connect with the bike, authenticate yourself so you can control the bike, and you're running your e-bike from your iPhone or Android phone, from your smartphone. So you're dealing with it entirely differently. And so before this, the Japanese Chinese and their motorbike, they were known as copiers, copying Japanese and American motorbikes. This electric bike is not a copy, and it's obviously a unique thing. It's not beautiful. You saw that motorcycle with the angular box. That wasn't beautiful, but it certainly is eye-catching and gets immediate recognition. And that box that you saw houses the electronics and a about a 13 kilowatt hour battery, and it doubles as the main frame of the motorcycle. And motorbike companies around the world are wrestling, trying to figure out how to style their electric bikes. Combustion engines have become a big part of the design language of motorcycles, and it's proving tough to make electric bikes look right without this motor in them. And so Da Vinci has gone for what they call a brutalist approach, emphasizing the fact that its bikes are different rather than having them try to fit into our expectation. Now, let me give you some stats on this bike. Its battery has a fast charging system that allows it to be charged in 30 minutes if your power source is robust enough. And it powers a 100 kilowatt motor, which would be 135 horsepower, which is a lot on a motorbike. And it has 627 foot-pounds of torque. To me, that sounds like enough. If you start it full on, the bike would turn over backwards, do a backflip, and crush you into the ground. So that's a lot of torque. And it goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and has a top speed of 124 miles an hour. And it does this, since it's an electric bike, all in one gear. So you don't have to shift and stuff like this. And one part of the advantage of the Da Vinci design, like with the Tesla, is the ease that they can be upgraded with things like rider assistance technology. And so Da Vinci has done that, and they call their DC 100, quote, a two-wheeled robot. And it includes things like the ability to drive in reverse at low speeds. When can you do that on your existing motorbike? And there's just one brake lever and no foot controls. A right-hand lever operates both brakes at once, and their cornering anti-skid braking system. They have other things like a assistant to start you going up on a hill where you need more torque, a hill descent controls, so you use your regenerative braking to slow you down going downhill. They have a corner traction reporting control, and like I was saying, a regenerative charging system to keep your battery topped up. And you're using your phone as the instrument paddle. Some critics say you have to wonder about the decision of the phone because these phone technology is changing pretty fast, and you would like your motorbike to have a life span of decades, and so you might have to keep your old phone going to run your motorbike. And they also promise, like Tesla, they will continue to improve the DC 100 with over-the-air software updates. And they're saying future versions will have additional features like the ability to balance itself and even to self-ride, to drive itself. And this will allow you to park it automatically and also to summit it when you need it. And the US market price for this is not cheap. It's $27,500. I know nothing about motorcycles, but that sounds like a lot to me. But this is a case where the Chinese are coming, and the Chinese advantages in these electric vehicles are moving into products besides automobiles. So are you guys ready to drive your 127 horsepower bike 0 to 60 in 3 seconds?
Yeah, just what I need.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that much power scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I've got
be,
It was interesting to read the comments that people had at the end of the article. Most of the people commenting were for sure motorcyclists. They did not like the looks of it at all.
Of course.
And they really didn't like the price. So
Right.
there wasn't one positive comment to the article.
Now, the other thing the motorcycle drivers would hate is, as an EV, it hardly makes any noise.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh. So you're going to have to put a speaker system on it so you can vroom, vroom, vroom.
Tesla, in order to conform to EU regulations, their speaker does emit sound at low speeds.
Uh-huh.
But for some reason, they haven't implemented that in North America.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and Tesla's not the only one that has done that. There are a bunch of EV makers that have a variety of different external noise systems. It's funny that that's a problem. But I know certainly from the days when I used to drive sports cars that drivers of these performance vehicles like the sound they make. I really like the sound that my Alfa Romeo made, especially I had a problem for a while when my muffler fell off of the end of the exhaust manifold, and it sounded so good. The only time there was a problem is at that time I lived in an apartment complex, and driving through the narrow spaces to get to my parking place, you'd be surprised how much noise that car made.
But Chad can also attest that the Tesla not making any noise is a problem with pedestrians.
Right. Absolutely. You know, you'd be surprised what you use to pay attention to the details.
Yes, the Tesla makes a noise when you back up. I think they've put something in it so people know that it's backing up anyway.
Okay.
But you're right. You come to a corner, making a right turn. You better be careful about pedestrians because they don't hear you.
Okay, so let me continue. The next story is an environmental story, and this talks about a new industrial age with the coming renewable energy boom. And we hear many negative stories. This one is a positive story, and so the world for this story is at the dawn of a new industrial age of clean energy technology manufacturing that will triple by 2030 and create millions of jobs. This is according to the International Energy Agency, IEA. And the global market for key technologies, including solar panel, wind turbines, EV batteries, heat pumps, and electrolyzers for hydrogen, will be worth about 650 billion a year by the end of decade, 3 times larger than current levels, and related jobs in manufacturing will more than double from 6 million to 14 million by 2030. And further rapid industrial employment growth is expected in the following decade as the transition progresses. Now, so it's not going to be a bubble, but rather this is the beginning of a new trend in terms of the realignment of the workforce in the world. Now, presently, China has been dominating both the production of the products and trade of most clean energy technologies. And there's a problem that they see now still with the concentration of both resource extraction and manufacturing. And these concentrations presently pose real risk. 3 countries apply for account for 70% of the manufacturing capacity for solar, wind, and heat pump technology, with China dominating in all of them.
Okay.
And the DRC produces more than 2/3 of the world's cobalt, and Australia, China, and Chile account for more than 90% of the global production of lithium. And so already this is a problem.
Because I'm having a shower.
In the last year, the increasing cost of lithium has actually driven up battery prices by about 10%. And so many new jobs are coming. One of the things I have to wonder is, where do we get the workers for them? In the U.S., unemployment is at pretty much historical lows. We've heard about China is running out of people and workers. And I wonder if we're having all these millions of new jobs in new categories, where are we going to get the workers?
Automate them.
So anyway, what do you guys think?
Well, a lot of them will be replaced by automation anyhow, I would think, as a solution. Where you would have to have 10 workers, now you'd have 1 or something like that.
I noticed also that the predicted tripling by 2030 depends on all the countries meeting their pledges, which they never haven't yet. So I'm not sure that's going to work.
But it's going to be more. We know it's going to be more, and we know it's going to be a lot more.
Absolutely.
And it's being driven by a number of elements, one of which is that for EVs and renewable energy, it's cheaper for the product life of the product than doing it the old way. And so a big portion of the growth is going to be driven just by economies. And that's the stuff that makes it pretty inevitable.
One thing about this, though, is that it shows a recognition that it's not going to happen very quickly. A doubling of the number of workers doing green energy jobs won't be very many. And what it really shows is that this transition away from fossil fuels is going to be a lot slower than people would like.
Well, it's harder. One of the things that is currently happening that will ease the access to workers is now there is a shift underway from China to India. And India has not only now more people, but also more young people. And I know, I first went into India where we were living about 15 years ago, and India knew that they have a lot of people coming. And one of the things that they have been madly doing for the last 15 years is building new colleges and increasing the ability to teach and train at a high level these hundreds of millions of young people in the country.
I'm just amazed that applicants to Indian Institute of Technology apply to Caltech and MIT as backup schools.
Yes. So anyway, there will be workers, I believe, to be able to fill the jobs, but a lot of them won't be American workers or Canadian workers. They'll move to India, and as Norman was talking about, to Africa, because Africa is still, an almost untouched resource. One of the things I've been waiting for, by the way, is hearing about people moving their call centers from India to Nairobi.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't heard of it yet. I don't think it's because it isn't happening. I think it's just because it's not visible enough to show up in the media. Okay. So now the Pentagon has released its 2022 UFO report. I would notice it's 2023, so it's a little late. And this is really the first report. It was mandated by the 2022 National Defense Authorization, and it established an, quote, all-domain anomaly resolution office, the AARO. And they gathered input from the FAA, from the National Oceanographic and Atmosphere Administration, NOAA, the Department of Energy, NASA, the intelligence community, and the military intelligence offices. And from all these sources, the report says that there were 510 cataloged UAP reports. Now, UAP is the new acronym for unidentified aerial phenomena. It replaces UFO in these reports. And the majority of these reports were from the Navy and the Air Force. And out of the 510, they assessed the 360 that had been newly identified since the creation of this office, the AARO. And of these, there were 26, fewer than 10%, that were uncrewed aircraft like drones. 163 were attributed to balloons or balloon-like entities. A few were found to be airborne clutter like birds or plastic shopping bags. And then 171 remain, quote, uncharacterized and unattributed. That's about half of them, which were characterized as we don't know. And some of these appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance characteristics and require further analysis. These might be the UFOs that we've been hearing about forever. Again, they just don't know what they are. And if they had unusual flight capacities, then they were something that we don't know about, maybe. And this doing this shows a growing emphasis in the U.S. anyway, prompted in part by the proliferation of drones. And part of their concerns about drones is some of these might be intelligence gathering by countries that want to know more about what's happening in the USA. And one of the places where these events continue to occur is in restricted or sensitive airspace. So it could be surveillance. And there have been no reported collisions between U.S. aircraft and UAPs. So far it's not a safety risk, but the report shows that the U.S. government seems to be taking UAPs and airspace safety issues seriously. So I don't know, was there ever a government report about UFOs before this, or is this the first? Do you guys know?
I don't know. There have been some reports by various agencies, but these were more papers that were put out and stuff like that. This is the first official thing.
Okay.
And there were a lot of reports that the CIA and people did, but they all remained classified.
Right.
Right.
Though apparently
I believe that there's life outside of our universe, but I also question, why is there no visitors? And I think all of these unidentified flying objects could be, the word unidentified is the real word. They just haven't been identified, but they'll be explained. I had an occasion to do some research on this, and the average distance between stars that can have life is 500 light years. Now that's 3,000 billion miles.
that's a long drive.
It's a long drive, and I think that's the whole point of it. On top of this, civilizations, and I believe there are some out there, or were some, they're not just sitting around. They come in and out of existence. It's estimated to be about 100 million years that a civilization can be in existence before they self-destruct, like we're trying to do. And when you take that into account, it's 12 trillion miles between life, other life out in the universe. People aren't just going to drop by to say hello. That's a long time to drive. And possibly they're just not.
That I have read in discussions about the subject say that because of the distances, they feel like it's unlikely that whatever is coming from some other planet is run by some living organism. More likely it's some real high-tech drone.
Right. And with the civilizations going in and out of existence, by the time we get something, they're gone. They're not here anymore. I ran across an equation called the Drake equation.
Yes.
Some of you might have heard of it.
Yes, of course.
The Drake equation is a self thing. You plug in your numbers and to find out how much life there is in the universe. And so I plugged in all of the reasonable numbers. It kind of tells you what the reasonable numbers are, and hit compute. The answer came out 1. That would be us.
Well, we'll see. I have trouble with any human exceptionalism ideas because the universe is, after all, a big place.
Right. There is something out there.
Right. And certainly one of the things that exists in space is nucleic acids, the material that we're made from. So anyway, we'll see. Maybe we won't, but maybe somebody will. And one of the things that they're trying to do with these new instruments like the Webb is refine the numbers that go into that Drake equation. So we're trying to understand it better. And so we'll see. So the next story I have is about how the zebra got its stripes. And this has been a mystery for a long time because why in the heck do zebras have stripes and other things don't? And, while some of the ideas were about camouflage, if you've ever seen a zebra, you might notice that it doesn't seem very camouflaged. It stands out. And so it turns out researchers say the pattern appears to confuse flies, which discourages them from landing on the zebras for a quick bite. And so they did a study that involved horses, zebras, and then horses dressed as zebras, which still makes me laugh. And they found out the patterns only have an effect when the flies get close to the zebras. The flies seem to behave naturally around both the zebras and the horses until it comes into landing. And when it comes into landing, these horse flies, when they're landing on the zebras, were coming in fast or turning away, sometimes even colliding with the zebras, rather than doing a nice controlled flight and landing. And the zebras, the researchers, when they put black and white zebra striped coats on their 7 horses, then let me see, I might have a picture. If I was smart, I would have a picture of the zebras. Here we are. There's a zebra, a horse with its zebra coat. And if you would notice, the horse's head sticks out and doesn't have the coat, and the coat is just over its body. And what they found was the rate at which the flies landed on the horse's exposed heads was the same as it had always been, but they touched down and landed on the zebra coat far less often than either a black or a white garment. And so the zebra coat seems to give them some protection. It doesn't help from long-range deterrent, but when the flies got closer, it helps. And they think it's because of the flies' low resolution vision. So from a distance, if you're a fly, from a distance of 2 meters or so, a zebra looks just like a gray horse. They won't be able to see the stripes at all. And then when they get close, there is this sudden reveal of the stripes that they're not sure why. Maybe it surprised the insects and made them veer off, or interfered with their perceptions about how fast objects were moving past them, affecting their ability to land. They're not sure why, but they are fairly sure that it has to do with this low-res vision systems. And zebras, if you look at their evolution, have developed in places in the world where flies carry pretty nasty diseases. And so there's big fitness consequences to being bitten by flies, and horses or zebras that are not bitten by flies are healthy and reproduce better and do all of those other things. So I guess this means if you want to prevent your horse from being bitten by flies, you should get it a zebra overcoat.
Or yourself.
Or yourself.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, horseflies, does anybody seen these horseflies?
Oh, yeah,
They're pretty
they're
big.
endemic
Yeah.
on the East Coast, and they're
Yes.
really nasty.
They're
Really
big
nasty.
and
They're
nasty.
big. They take a visible chunk of meat out of you when they bite. So,
Uh,
yeah.
So they're much larger than deer flies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Those aren't nice either. I don't know whether zebra stripes will have any effect on them, but yeah, you want to avoid those. Nasty.
So it still amuses me how clever the scientists are, and whoever thought about making a zebra coat for a horse to test their theory, I think was imaginative and creative.
Well, it's interesting too that when the zebra is standing still, the stripes work to confuse the flies. But they have done tests with a group of zebras running, and that confuses lions because
Okay.
there's so many lines from the stripes on
Okay.
the zebra that the lions can't see the outline of the zebra.
Okay.
All they see is kind of a blizzard of stripes moving, and they can't see individual zebras, so they don't know
And
who.
that would be very important because I know the way lions hunt is they identify not the herd of zebras to chase, but an individual zebra to go after.
Yeah, and the moving zebras are what confuses the lions.
Okay, so it's a dual purpose.
I guess so. But it shows the importance of understanding how your opponent senses the environment. And you have to be able to see or understand how the opponent sees the world if you're going to defeat the opponent.
Well, I think evolution did it by not figuring it out, but by trying different things.
Yeah, trial and error.
Trial and error.
That's
You
right.
bet.
Okay, so now on to China, and the world's most populous country hit a historic turning point last year, and China announced its first population decline in 6 decades, with 850,000 fewer people at the end of last year than in 2021. And this article is a discussion between a writer and a prize-winning author and journalist Mei Fong about this. And the writer is Jeff Bennett. And he asks, for what can this decline be attributed to? He asks Mei Fong, and she responds, China is not unusual in having seen a population decline. Most modern nations where women are educated and have smaller families see that. What's unusual about China is the transition has occurred so fast. What takes most developed countries 50 years to do, China has done in 1 generation. And that's because of the one-child policy. And not only does it have fewer people, it also has a very bad mix of fewer people in that a very large portion of the population is male. And this is because of the one-child policy. And the people, if they could only have one child, wanted to have a male child. and this has affected the mix of male versus female. And this predominance of males in the population makes it very hard to overcome this population decline because there are not as many women to have babies, even if they want to have babies. And this male population is also going to make it very bad as they get old and retire, because as the women in our audience can verify, a lot of men are not as good at taking care of themselves as women. So having a bunch of male oldies is another kind of a problem. And Jeff says this new data came alongside the announcement of China's worst economic performance in nearly half a century. So what are the implications for China's economy? And she says the population decline is just one of the demographics. Now, by 2050, 1 in 4 Chinese will be retirees. And so the worker to retire ratio is going to be huge. It'll impact economic growth because of all the money that has to go into pensions. And also the kind of markets where we see innovation, where we see creativity, generally have a younger workforce. And so markets dominated by the elderly population are not going to be as innovative and creative. And Jeff asks, how concerned is the Chinese government? And Mei Fong responds, very. In fact, in the most recent speech that Jinping made, he actually talked about the need to talk about population, the need to support and grow population. And this was the first time he's actually talked about it. And the Chinese government is worried about this sudden whipsawing where it went from a one-child policy to a two-child policy to a three-child policy in a span of just 5 years. So this speaks to how worried they are if they're changing their policies so fast. And Jeff asked, what would a solution look like? Is it as simple as encouraging people to have more children? And Mei Fong says, no, that hasn't worked at all. They've tried it. Incentives will have to be a part of it, but China more historically has gone disincentive routes, punishments, not rewards, and actually rewarding people for their behavior would be a different thing for the Chinese government to do. And the China problem is particularly extreme because the population now is so very male and it's going to become so very elderly. So she doesn't say it, but I would say the road back from their population problem really isn't possible. So as we see the projections of China's growth in the rest of this century, the projections are that by the end of their century, the Chinese population will be about half of what it is now. So
But
I think that's going to change.
She has developed a program to minimize the graying of the population.
That's right, COVID.
By removing the lockdown for unvaccinated people, it will be the elderly that diminish in their proportion of the population most rapidly.
But it's, if you look at it, they have 1.3 billion people about, and even if 50% of them were graying, and that's too much. They said in the 2050, a quarter will be retirement. You know, a few million here or there is just a drop in the bucket. So, you know, I think they're stuck.
Well, it's interesting. I just finished an 8-week course on China, which really was not inspiring me at all. And when I see how Beijing has a big foothold in Canada and the United States, I mean everywhere, I just think it's rather ironic that their government, starting way back right after the war, this is kind of like, sorry, you're probably going to think I'm terrible, just retribution. Like, they've been brutal with their population. Brutal.
Yes.
And now, gee, they're screwed.
Well, oops.
Sorry.
Now, when I was in,
I read
go
somewhere-
ahead, please.
I read somewhere that one of the reasons is because women in China are just saying, no, I don't want another kid.
Yes.
I don't want one, let alone
I've
2
read,
or 3.
I've read that as well. And they say, you know, the women you're talking about are urban women, and part of what they know is for the children to be able to succeed, they have to go to a good school, not the government school. And that costs so much money that most people feel like they can't afford it.
In the old days, children were an asset. Now, children are a liability.
Well, if you're a farmer, if you're an agriculturist, you need workers. And so having lots of children is a good deal. If you're living in the city, children are an expense. And so all over the world, as the populations move from the countryside into cities, the birth rate goes down every place.
Yeah, but not all nationalities are interested in reducing the birth rate.
Yeah, like the Middle East is still keen
Yeah.
on lots of
Uh-huh.
children.
Right.
Very. When I
But
was working if a family of because I work with new immigrants coming in, a family of 4, I'm going to say Muslim, but it could be other nationalities, could be African too, and they come in, there's 4, turn around, by the time they're ready for high school, there's 10 in the family, and the girls, even in Canada, are being married off at 14 and 15. Like, I know there's great sides to all people, but they really want more population, as you said, in the Middle East.
And, you know, I have Chinese friends who lived in Hong Kong. And, you know, one thing I know about the traditional ideas of the Chinese family is they want children. You know, so to have the Chinese woman in this generation say, I don't want to have children, is an enormous change in social values. Okay, let me go to the last story. It's a medical story. And at Cambridge University, they've completed a successful trial of their artificial pancreas that helps type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes better manage their blood sugar level. This test was on type 2. They'd already done type 1 with very positive results. And here, this consists of an off-the-shelf glucose meter and an insulin pump that is driven by a cell phone app. And the device and app, powered by its algorithm, doubled the duration of time that the patient's blood sugar levels were on target, and reduced by 50% the time spent with blood sugar that was too high. I think those are very similar perspectives. And again, the device is an off-the-shelf glucose meter and then a pump. Let me get the picture, this image of it. So you have a glucose meter, you have this insulin pump with its connection into your body with some line into your body, pumping insulin in as it's needed. So because of that, it's not as comfortable as you would like. And that is one of the objections of people to it. But this new process then runs automatically and as I say, drastically reduces the time when insulin levels are too high. One concern about insulin always has been if you get too much insulin and your blood sugar drops too low, you get hypoglycemia. My father had diabetes, as do I, and he passed out once because of the hypoglycemia when he was driving a car pulling a trailer.
Oh dear.
So it turns out that's can be a troublesome outcome. But anyway, with their testing that they did on this pump, they didn't have any cases of hypoglycemia, and the problem of high blood sugar was reduced by half over the people who are doing the conventional treatment of testing and injecting yourself. The people who use the pump very much liked the need that they didn't need to worry about their insulin levels anymore, and they didn't need to give themselves shots. Some people didn't like having this pump on their waistband pumping insulin into them, and they found that was a nuisance. But it was, they spoke of it as an annoyance rather than a problem. And so this is another example of medical technology trying to find approaches that work better with real people. And diabetes affects about 400 million people around the world. So it is a real common problem. And to find ways that you can live with it better and survive it better is a big deal. So let's hear it. Now, of course, my question when I hear about these kind of technologies, my regular question, since I live in Mexico, is, gee, when will it be available here? And never do I hear a good answer for that. Anyway, what do you guys think about the new insulin pump run by an algorithm AI?
Just don't confuse it with your electric motorcycle algorithm. That could be really disastrous.
Uh-huh.
0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Whoa.
I know.
It has the potential for significantly reducing healthcare costs because a lot of mismanaged diabetics wind up in emergency wards and hospitals and whatever.
Absolutely.
But in Canada, there's a deal now that diabetics get that is a patch that's on their shoulder or their arm that monitors blood glucose levels, and it records it or reports it on your cell phone. So I don't think it automatically doses the insulin, but it lets you know when your blood sugar levels are at either end of the scale and need attention.
And certainly, presently, my diabetes is controlled with diet, so I'm not doing injections. I was doing injections for a few years, And the actual fact is it was easy and not a nuisance. And though I hate shots, giving myself insulin injections were no problem.
Well, the other thing is they're coming up with stem cell research now that
Yes.
is correcting type 2 diabetes.
Yes, right, to beef up the pancreas with more production capability. Yes.
You know,
Wonderful.
my wife is a type 1 diabetic, and she has a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. And I'm just wondering, how is this for type 2? How is that different than what my wife has?
I think it's similar. The difference is really with this, as I understand it, is mainly the quality of the algorithm.
Yes,
And-
because the automatic administration of insulin has been around for at least 10 years.
But
But I
that said, with earlier versions of it, then you had to give it feedback before you were going to eat, for example. And with this system, you don't have to give it any feedback. It just works all the time.
Okay, that must be correct, because she has to intervene based on her glucose level, and
Okay.
but it's a lot easier than giving yourself injections anyway. It's just
Right,
pressing a button.
right.
Okay.
So
Richard?
anyway, any more comments?
Richard, thank you again.
Is that Zed sitting beside you?
No, that's Jim Luce.
Okay. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Very
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
Adios, and we'll see you next week. Thank you guys all for joining.
Okay. Bye-bye.